So one of the parts that didn't make it into my bio, and this is not on you because you picked up the mantle, is that I went back and added a degree in social work, a master's in social work. So I'm working as a social worker right now in a medical clinic, and it's a medical clinic that serves trans and non-binary youth. It's the place of the sort that's under attack across the country right now. And I love this work. I love working with these youth that are coming into the wholeness of their being and struggling through the questions that come with that time of life. And I've been thinking about a teenage girl that I met there. This teenage girl is trans feminine, and so for her, this means she was assigned male at birth, but she identifies now both as female and transgender. But as we often tell our patients, we are so much more than just our gender. This young woman also has Dominican heritage and identifies as Black. And when I meet with these young people, they're often anxious or unsure, or sometimes even openly struggling as they work to come to terms with their gender identity in a world that doesn't always welcome them. But this young woman knew exactly who she was, and she knew exactly why she was there, and there was nothing apologetic about who she was, nor should there have been. Mm-hmm. So the conversation with her was a surprisingly easy one, and we spoke of the ways in which she wanted to plan for her future gender transition. I answered questions and addressed concerns as they arose, and she expressed easy comfort with the answers. This young woman was accompanied to this first meeting with us by her father, and I realized very quickly it was her dad who was struggling. He was very quiet, but it was very clear he was listening carefully. Near the end of our time together, the dad looked at me and he began to speak. And then he stopped, almost swallowing his words, as though he didn't want to say whatever was on his mind. So I waited. He took a deep breath, he locked eyes with me, and he asked me the question that was on his heart. And the question he asked me was this: how do I keep her alive? And I knew what he was asking. His daughter is young, trans, female, and BIPOC. It is a dangerous world out there for that mix of identities. The average age of death for BIPOC transgender women is 39. 39. We lose these amazing humans far too often, either to suicide worn down by a world which refuses to accept and affirm them, or at the hands of someone who commits violence against them because they can justify it. They see them as less than fully human. So I didn't immediately answer this dad because I knew he knew these statistics. And I finally looked at him and I admitted as much. And I said, "You're right, it is a very dangerous world. But here's the good news I can tell you. Transgender youth with one affirming parent, one parent that sees them and loves them for who they are 25% less likely to commit suicide. Wow. Your love is her protective factor." And he sat back in his chair and he eased a little and he said, "Good, because that's what you'll always have, my love." And in that case, love was that layer of protection that could be offered in the moment. But this is not always so. When children or youth are referred to our clinic with one or two parents, sometimes with foster care, or maybe even alone if they're 18 or older, they're so often struggling. It isn't with being transgender or non-binary that they're struggling with, but it's amazing that bullying starts as early as kindergarten against transgender youth. Many have thought about suicide because the world does not accept them. Sometimes they're young adults, homeless because few places will hire a trans person, even fewer if your gender identity doesn't match your presentation. And in English, if you don't know what that means, it means that if I say I'm male, but I'm wearing nail polish, as I sometimes am. But a lack of work leads to a lack of housing, and the problems quickly mount. All of this because they're trying to live into who they are. In the past year or so, more than 500 laws have been introduced at the local, state, regional, and national level. After the Trump years, when hate moved into the public square yet more, legislators looked around and said, where can we fix our sights? Where's the easy mark? And they picked the transgender community. The rallying cry of hate against the other is so incredibly effective. And this wave of hate legislation is so overwhelming and so quick that it caught my community by surprise. We're still figuring out how to respond to it. And while that's true, all these laws are getting approved and they're showing up at the state and local and school board and levels and being put into law. You know, a year or so ago, some of the worst laws around transgender folks were what bathrooms we could use. And those are bad laws. Those are very bad laws. But nothing like the laws that have been enacted in the past year, laws that allow for transgender children to be removed from loving homes. Laws that are cruel and vicious in intent. They deny gender-affirming care to all youth and increasingly adults in many states. Laws that no longer allow you to talk to a guidance counselor about your concerns. Laws that disallow you from changing your name on any legal state document. Laws against medical professionals and behavioral health professionals such as myself who care for these youth, often making it a felony if we care for a child in which the state has denied care for that child. And this is all done under the realm of protecting children, which we know is a lie.
A lie.
There's so much more I could tell you here, but I'm just going to tell you two more things about these laws. One, Missouri just put into place laws denying gender-affirming care to adults. And this tells us what we've known for years, that this isn't about protecting children, this is about attacking a community. And while the ACLU, God bless them, has managed to get a hold in that state to temporarily hold those laws, it is temporary. More and more professionals, doctors and nurses and social workers are leaving the field because we're afraid of what's going to happen to us legally. More and more youth and young adults are afraid to seek care because they're afraid they're going to wind up on a list somewhere that will be used against them. And we saw that with DACA students. It's not an unreasonable fear.
Right.
And then there's Florida. And everything's bad, but Florida is all special. They passed a law stating that sex crimes against children are now punishable by the death penalty, which is terrible. But what makes it unlivable is it's now a felony for myself, for example, as a trans person, to be in a Florida public restroom with a minor. So when you do the math, that's a felony. That felony is punishable by death. It is a terrifying moment for so many. Mutual aid networks, escape routes, and legal prosecution of providers is our reality. We live in a country where the foremost LGBTQ organizations are saying we're in a massive refugee crisis. It's no longer safe for many of us to be here. And as bad as this is, I will never tell you, nor will I believe, that it's without hope. Like that dad we talked about, like that big brother, Aiden, from the story, it's still about how we love. It's still about how we show up for each other that matters. And that's where our faith tradition, Unitarian Universalism, comes in. A few months ago, we started talking about Article 2. Can you nod your head if you remember, if you've heard about Article 2, just so I know? All right, so a few of you. It's a proposed change to the Unitarian Universalist principles and purposes. We've had the 7 principles. This is a very different way of thinking about it. And I'm going to tell you that when I first heard about it, I was not a fan. My first thought was, there are so many problems in the world, and we Unitarian Universalists are focused on words rather than actions. And I'm going to tell you, I could not have been more wrong. Article 2 realigns our faith touchstones, and it puts love at the center. And it's uncomfortable for a lot of people because love is a squishy word. But what I realized is what it's asking us to do is to put love at the center of everything, not in some Pollyanna love is love sort of way, but more in the we need each other to survive sort of love. The recognition of how deeply interconnected our fates and our futures are. I love being a UU because it never lets me live my faith easily. It's always pulling us into deeper relationship. And Article 2 asks us to go to the margins, to see who is not included, and to make space for them. It doesn't center those of us who are comfortable, but instead focuses on a love in which all of us can thrive. And I'm going to give you 2 examples of this. Until about 5 years ago, there had never been a transgender woman settled minister in all of Unitarian Universalism, any congregation, across the board. They had been, if they were hired at all, as contract or interim ministers, but our congregations were uncomfortable. But we couldn't both claim an expansive love and also summarily exclude whole groups of people. And we've done our work, and it's starting to change, and I see lots of trans and non-binary and otherwise gender-identified colleagues leading in lots of settings within Unitarian Universalism. The second is the vote that just happened at General Assembly. We voted into the UUA presidency, the Reverend Dr. Sophia Bentecourt. Sophia is many things, but she's Black and openly queer. And that was unimaginable 10 years ago. She is going to be good for this faith tradition in ways I believe that we don't even know yet. But we wouldn't have done that 10 years ago. We weren't there. We keep growing and we keep learning. And to me, that's proof of what we're capable of together. So when I go back to that day in the room with that worried dad, rightly worried, asking, how do I keep her alive? I bring that question to you. Because I'm a stranger to you. We don't know each other. And I know it takes established work to do what I'm asking you to do. But here's what I do know. There are Unitarian Universalists already fleeing the most repressive states. when they can, and they're trying to simply survive in those times where they don't have the means to flee. We need you, friends. We need you more than I have words for. There are quiet but active networks growing within Unitarian Universalism, providing housing, money, and more to those at the margins, those who we can help keep alive with an embodied, active, committed love. And if this is you and you want to know more, reach out to me. Reach out to the Reverend Ashley Horan, who leads our Side with Love campaign and does unbelievable work there. This is work we can and we must do together. And I pray that our love, made manifest with our actions, will be enough. Blessed be.